We grew sales in Canada to $1 million. And he picked up the phone one day and called me and said, we're cutting your commission rate from 8% to 4%. And I walked away from $100,000 a year in commission. But
meet Robert Webb, 45-year independent sales rep and RepHunter member. From selling newspapers at age 9 to building million-dollar lines as a connector who never touches product or money, all built on relationships and integrity.
The old 80-20 adage in business always holds true. You'll make 80% of your revenue from 20% of the companies you rep, and you better look after those 20%. When you don't touch the product and you don't touch the money, you can do a lot of volume and make a lot of money by having 9 different companies simultaneously in a growth pattern to 2 to 4 million. I represented a company for 15 years, watched them grow from a $20 million company to a $300 million company, and went through 6 venture capital buyouts that they had. And finally, they said to me,
"This is an episode of RepIntel, Insights from Top Sales Reps. I am your host, Jeffrey Simon. Our focus, how to unleash your success as an independent sales rep. I am very excited to have as my guest on the show today, Robert Webb. Robert is an established independent sales representative and member of RepHunter. We will be sharing Robert's experience as a successful independent rep. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Hi, Jeff. Nice to be with you.
Great. Really glad to be able to have this session today and that you've taken your time and willing to share your experience so that we can add it to our library of podcast repping resources for new independent reps and reps that would like to improve their business.
I've done this for 45 years.
Yeah.
So I started my career working one side of the rep business and then went all the way around the selling side in terms of manufacturer's agent, then the actual end user, then a distributor, and then came right back around. I worked for what is now AD. It was IDI. I was vice president of national accounts in Canada, and I built them a $35 million business out of nothing in national accounts over a 9-year period. And then they hired a new president, and I don't play well with guys who are fools. And so we parted company after about 3 months because we couldn't work together. And I started my own rep agency. That's 20 years ago.
That's a transition from like in-house sales to independent repping.
Yeah. I went back to what I started with, which was repping. You know, we were the Canadian agents for Barden bearings, for Andrews bearings, for Anderton retaining rings. I could tell you about companies, you know, and like the companies I represent now, it's kind of neat. I still have bearing companies, but I have a German company, Brockhaus Measurement, and we actually manufacture testing systems for stators for EVs. Okay. So these machines are $300,000 machines, and we've sold one to everyone from Tesla, General Motors, BMW, Ford, VW's new plant that they're building in Canada, Scheffler for their Victosis plant in Chatham. You know, and it's sort of bleeding edge technology. But the neat part is it's all synergistic. So we test the stator, we sell the bearing, and then I also repped a company that sold balancing equipment. So all of the rotors have to be balanced. So if you're in the EV market building motors for electric vehicles, I like you because I'm going to get 3 and 4 kicks of the can.
Yeah.
That's excellent. You know, there's a need for this kind of information exchange within the repping industry. And it's nice to see that RepHunter is taking the lead in facilitating this for new reps.
Well, thank you for saying that. We certainly appreciate having you as a longtime member And you've shared with us that you've gotten great benefit from your relationship with RepHunter.
Yeah, over a 20-year relationship, I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars in commission through relationships that I've been able to foster through RepHunter, and it's been a wonderful experience. And certainly love to help anyone that is interested in following a similar path.
It's, kind of a quiet time of the year for a lot of reps, but on the other hand, they don't really want to get into a lot of things like this. So, it's good that, you're able to take the time to do that. So, I'm going to ask things like the first thing I'm going to start out is sales. How did you get into sales?
In 1978, I was working for a manufacturer's agent.
Okay.
And I've been in sales all my life from the time I was probably 9. I started
Okay.
selling Toronto Telegram newspapers in Toronto, and I've always sold something. Went through, I was going to be an auto mechanic. That was my focus in life. But I learned very quickly that you can make a lot more money selling auto parts than replacing them at the time. And that very quickly turned into working for a manufacturer's agent selling industrial supplies in the bearing industry. And 45 years later, I'm still doing the same thing.
Okay.
Now it's my own company. I have my own company for 20 plus years. I've repped over the years probably hundreds of different companies, all with a relatively similar background. We've taken companies that want to do business in Canada or the US and introduced them and usually get them from their first sale to usually somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range, at which point it converges. That's usually when they want to hire me, and that's when I'm not a really good employee. So it's onward and upward. It's time for them to go and hire someone, and we help them through the selection process, getting their business set, and then they're gone, and we're starting with someone new.
Okay. So you're transitioning them. You're doing it for them, outsourcing, and then gradually you train them so that they can do it themselves.
Yeah, and I simultaneously do somewhere between 7 and 9 companies at a time.
Okay. Okay.
So I have a lot of balls in the air.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of turnover, a lot going on as the companies go through the different phases.
Well, yeah. And so, you're having to, it's one thing to get the business started, depending on what the company is, what they manufacture, because it's some are services, but whatever their service or product is, we look for things that are synergistic with the existing companies that I've sold or am selling to make life easier for me. And in doing so, there's a neat little thread that kind of goes through each one. Some we talk about, their path to market is through distribution. So if they're a bearing manufacturer or a bearing type product and they want to go through distribution, it's introducing them to companies like Motion or Applied or Canadian Bearings, whoever. And so getting that process set up and that approval process done where the two of them can do business together. Because when I started, I was working for a manufacturer's rep that held the product. So they bought the product and sold the product. I don't touch product. I don't touch money. I am a connector, a business connector.
Okay.
Basically means is that it's really, from my perspective, it's the perfect business. When you don't touch the product and you don't touch the money, you can do a lot of volume and make a lot of money by having 9 different companies simultaneously in a growth pattern to 2 to 4 million. You can see where I don't have to worry about stopping what I'm doing. Oh, hang on a second there, Jeff. Well, I got to go and pack up these bearings that UPS is coming to take. I don't do any of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I introduce you to a manufacturer. We negotiate a sales program for you. You place your order directly with him. He sends you the goods. You send him the money, and he sends me a commission.
You learn that it's better to be the connector and not be involved in the product or the cash. And here's a great story that says where that went wrong, where we mistakenly got involved with a product and we learned our lesson.
After 45 years, Jeff, I could tell you all kinds of stories.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. So
been there, done that, seen it.
Right.
And I do a lot of business mentoring now for new entrepreneurs in Canada and in the US. Futurpreneur in Canada and SCORE in the US.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So, but I think once you hit 65, you have a license to tell stories.
Okay.
So when you want a story, you say, hey, is there any story about that one? And I'll tell you a story about that one.
All right. Yeah, we'll do that. Some of the other areas we're going to cover, we'll talk about, your experience with RepHunter. We don't really need to go, I'm just giving you the high level. We'll do that. We don't really need to do that now.
Sure. And just so you know, I've had an excellent relationship with RepHunter for probably 15 to 18 years.
Sounds about right. The reason I say that is because your member ID is a very low member ID. Not only is it only 5 digits, it's in the low 5 digits. And, we're up to 120,000 right now. So
wow.
So you've got a low number. That tells me in a real rough way about how long, since we've been doing it 25 years, it kind of, you can figure, oh, that must have been back in thus and such a time period. So,
yeah, I would think it was probably the early 2000s.
Yeah.
When, probably 2005, 6, somewhere in there.
Okay.
So
good. Well, it sounds like we've got good material for the thing. And then one final question. It's a question that is like something that you've learned that's counterintuitive. Like people think it should be this way, but you've learned, no, that doesn't work. It really has to be this way. And, some kind of a controversial or against the norm function.
And I think with RepHunter, there are a lot of things like that. And case in point happened this week. I get all kinds of opportunities, and you never know. You read their profile and it goes, I know nothing about that industry. I know nothing about that customer base, but I always will talk to the people. If they've reached out and they are looking for a rep, I will always connect back up. Very rarely this week, I did just tell one flat out, no, I'm not even interested to call you. Most of the time, I'll have a chat with them. Because I'm a connector, I know people. And so we start talking, and it's about, well, what are you looking for? What kind of business do you want? And very often through that process, I can introduce them to someone else, get a finder's fee for it, or there's all kinds of other arrangements that happen. If I could help somebody else grow their business, it never is detrimental to mine.
Okay, that's a good point that I think a lot of people would not really appreciate, not having been there and done that. So, yeah.
I think people will dismiss opportunities too quick because of it. You know what they say, if it looks like a black box, it probably is a black box, but you never know until you open the flap what's inside that black box. And it may be something totally different.
Right.
And so it's recognizing that opportunity. And I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars off of connections that I have made through RepHunter.
Well, that's just, music to our ears, so to speak. It tells us we're doing something good.
So you're looking at something, if someone's a salesperson and is thinking of becoming a rep, just help me to understand the purpose of using this for, so we can put the flavor on.
You mean the podcast or the RepHunter service?
Well, they're both.
Okay. Well, we do have uh, in the rep side, we have a training page. You might have seen it. You don't need training, but you might have looked at that page. But on the training page, we have a lot of, they're usually just a couple pages, short little things, tips for working with principals, that type of thing. And we just published we've had an e-guide for years, RepHunter's guide for working with independent reps, but it was really focused toward the principal, the one who's working with the rep. We just, in the last couple of weeks, created the rep version for that. So the training page and the rep guide, sometimes, it's not that often, but we do get a significant amount of people who come in and they say, I don't have independent repping experience, but I've been in sales 15 years and I want to be my own boss. Can you help me out? So we have this training material on the website that includes, the new e-guide, and we use that e-guide to promote, with the podcasts. It's like a call to action with the podcast promotion that is at various places, like on YouTube and so on. There would be links to the e-guide. So that's the website, how we help people. But the podcast itself would be generally of interest to people who, they've got sales experience, but they don't know the independent side of it.
Have you thought of even going one step further, like Mana, in terms of either providing courses or training and or contract, what's the right word? Blank contracts?
Well, we actually have. There was a time, a little ways back, we were thinking of maybe we should create some webinars about repping and or other, materials like you mentioned, Mana. They kind of have a different approach. They do more. They're they don't just do matching. They have a lot of membership functions that we've never really got into the webinar function, but it has come up. It's sort of a back burner idea. We decided to go with the podcast format to start with, but people have said, it's one step to go from a podcast to just go into a webinar. In fact, we're talking to a big name player, really big name player. What they want to do is have webinars. They've talked about doing webinars, for their members, which in effect tells them how to use the independent channel, which they're not really using right now. So it's kind of a discussion that's going on, but we haven't really developed it yet.
Yeah, I guess as I'm getting to the end of my career, I do it because I love doing it. But, it's one of those things where you kind of look at it and say, I've seen a lot of young guys that have tried to do repping and fallen flat in their nose because managing expectations is a tough gig. And being prepared for the attrition in repping. I represented a company for 15 years, watched them grow from a $20 million company to a $300 million company, and went through 6 venture capital buyouts that they had. And finally, they said to me, we need bricks and mortar in Canada. And I said, no, you don't. We need bricks and mortar in Canada. And I said, Well, I'll tell you what, this is where the rubber hits the road, because we tried it 10 years ago for your company and it didn't work. And so we pulled in the horns and we changed and went a different direction. If you want to go that route, you need to find another rep. And that company has acquired, that's 4 years ago, 5 years ago, they've acquired probably another 15 companies in the last 5 years. It's phenomenal what they're doing. And it's all through venture capital money. That tough way to grow a business, but
you think they wouldn't need it by once they're at that scale, they could finance it internally and avoid the vultures.
It's funny. The company, and it's a Solve Industrial. They're a big group now. They were PTI Industrial when I was repping them. And they are one of probably 100 companies that the venture capital company owns. And they're growing. In the last 2 months, they bought 3 companies. And I'm talking companies that are 20 to 25 million in size. So they're not small fry companies. They're probably $50 million acquisitions. So I think it's a house of cards. I think it'll implode, but what do I know? I'm just a sales guy. But the reality is that from a rep's standpoint, you have to be prepared. The old 80-20 adage in business always holds true. You'll make 80% of your revenue from 20% of the companies you rep, and you better look after those 20%. So if you have 10 companies, you know who's going to be the ones that are going to pay your way. And you got to look after those guys, have long-term relationships with them. Things happen. I've had guys pick up the phone. I took a guy, met him on RepHunter, a British company. He was in the bushing business. And he said I could sell half his line, because the other half of his line, he had a partner in the US who looked after North America. So I could sell solid bushings, but not sintered bushings. which is like taking one hand behind, tie it behind your back and say, go out. And we took the bait because I like a challenge. Between that and helping him develop a split bearing, we grew sales in Canada to $1 million. And he picked up the phone one day and called me and said, we're cutting your commission rate from 8% to 4%. I said, is that your way of saying thank you? Well, he goes we're paying you a lot of money right now. I said, you can't do what I am doing for you at 4%. Oh, well, don't look at it that way. You can grow this to 5 million and, you'll be making all kinds of money. I said, thank you. You'll have my letter canceling our contract this afternoon. You've got 90 days notice. And I hung up. And I walked away from $100,000 a year in commission. But integrity is more important to me than cash. So that is the thing that new reps need to be prepared. They need to be able to cover the first 6 months of being in business too. And they need to be able to negotiate with the right things. If someone's demanding that you be somewhere, we want you to go to Las Vegas for the ConMet show or whatever. Great. You're paying my expenses and you're paying for my time, because I'm not making money for anyone else while I'm there for you. And, a rep gets treated like a salesman without them paying a salary and expenses. So if you don't have that in your contract going forward, these are all the things I'm sure we can get into, but I'm thinking that if RepHunter had a webinar, like a SCORE type mentor service, where if you want to, there's a lot of old dogs like me around that have been manufacturers' agents forever that are retired now. And, if you had a slew of them under retainer and someone wants to just bounce some things off someone, it'd be a good place through RepHunter. It would be a great service that you could provide to the next generation coming along.
I wrote down a little earlier when you first started talking about the webinar, I wrote down that you might be a webinar resource. And it's kind of how I was thinking it was going. So for future development, this interview has turned into a pretty good representative podcast. I mean, it's really got what it takes, even though we didn't. I mean, because we went into stories and we didn't go through some of my specific questions, but I mean, we basically covered a lot of it anyways. So, Robert, I want to thank you for being on our show today. It's been a great experience, and you brought insights that are new insights, different ways of looking at things, and I'm sure appreciated by our viewers and our members. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Have a wonderful day and season's greetings.
Yeah. You too. Have a good one, and season's greetings to you and yours.
Thank you.